Ford V8 engine in the back of the Benetton. But when he came to the grid, Alain Prost was on pole position for the second time in as many races and for the second time in the French Grand Prix in as many editions. Beside him, pipped for pole, was his own teammate Ayrton Senna, Prost having announced that he would be leaving the McLaren team at the end of the year. Nigel Mansell was third on the grid in the much revised Ferrari, and fourth was Alessandro Nannini in that brand new car. Fifth was Thierry Boutsen in the Williams Renault, and sixth Gerhard Berger in the second Ferrari. Seventh was Philippe Alliot, doing very well in the Lolo Lamborghini, and beside him Riccardo Patrese in the second of the Williams Renaults. Ninth was Jonathan Palmer in the Tyrrell Ford, and 10th Mauricio Gugelmin in the first of the Leighton House March Judds. 11th, having his first Grand Prix, was Bertrand Gachot in the Onyx Ford, and beside him Ivan Capelli in the second of the Marches. 13th was Stefan Johansson in the second of the Onyxes, and 14th was newcomer Martin Donnelly in the Arrows. 15th was another newcomer, Eric Bernard, alongside Jean Alesi in the Tyrrell, so the newcomers doing well. 17th was Olivier Grouillard. 18th, René Arnoux in the two Ligiers. 19th, Satoru Nakajima with his Lotus teammate Nelson Piquet alongside. 21st, Gabriele Tarquini. 22nd, Stefano Modena. 23rd, Pierluigi Martini. 24th, Emanuele Pirro. And 25th, Eddie Cheever. Beside him, Alex Caffey. So the cars, as they came round on the warming up laps, or the final parade lap, and as we took a ride with Riccardo Patrese, he was in trouble. There was no power, silence in the Williams Renault number 6, and Patrese heading off the track, his race apparently all over. As he came to a halt, he was signalling to the marshals to try and push him round that final corner so at least he could get into his pit. The stones were being chucked up by the front wheel, and the marshals ran to his aid. When the race did get underway, it was Ayrton Senna who made the best start down into that first corner. No Riccardo Patrese then, Senna leading from Prost, Nannini and Nigel Mansell. But then there was drama. Mauricio Gugelmin locked up, launched himself off Thierry Boutsen's rear tyre and slid upside down off the track. There was chaos, drama, and a number of other phenomenal avoidances, including Jonathan Palmer and René Arnoux, both of them out of the race apparently, and Emanuele Pirro also stationary. Nigel Mansell with a damaged rear wing and stationary on the circuit. There was Mauricio Gugelmin hauled out of his car, but fortunately apparently unhurt. A remarkable accident. Gugelmin completely unhurt and walking away from his car as the fire extinguishers put out any potential fire there might have been. Gugelmin unhurt. The race stopped by the permanent starter. Let's have a look and see what it was like from Thierry Boutsen's point of view. Accelerating away behind Nigel Mansell, that's the Ferrari you can see straight ahead of you, down into the first corner. Alongside him is Alessandro Nannini. The two are close together. They're under-braking now for the first corner, and suddenly there is Gugelmin flying over the top, knocking Thierry Boutsen off to one side. Look at Olivier Grouillard, who goes over a piece of debris and then over the curb. Mansell is stopping. Boutsen is in trouble, slowing on the side of the track, and cars coming past him on either side. And here is another viewpoint. Watch out for the smoke. There it is, into the side of Thierry Boutsen. Look at the way it just flips up that march over onto the rear anti-roll bar, rollover bar, and Gugelmin in the car. Arnoux has a similar incident with Jonathan Palmer. Look at the way Gugelmin keeps his head off the track and miraculously escapes. A quite remarkable accident, but one that shows the strength of modern Formula One cars, because there is Mauricio Gugelmin completely unhurt, quite calm, and saying to himself, well, I better go back to the pits and see if they've got a spare car for me up there. a cursory glance at his stricken race car. There's Nigel Mansell being towed round, having stopped on the circuit, no rear wing. The car involved in that accident in quite a big way, but he will be going back to either try and get that car repaired. No, he gets into what is in fact Gerhard Berger's car, because Berger came in earlier on for the spare car. There's Alessandro Nannini taking up his position on the grid. And so the grid reforming, a gap for Nigel Mansell, a gap also where Mauricio Gugelmin should be, a gap also where Martin Donnelly should be, because all those three in the pit lane. But we have Alain Prost again on pole position, Ayrton Senna beside him, and then Alessandro Nannini. We're waiting for the lights. There are the three cars in the pit lane. On goes the light, and they're away, with Alain Prost making a good start this time from Ayrton Senna. And we wait to see, and there's Ayrton Senna pulling off the track. Perhaps two starts has been too much for his transmission, and Ayrton Senna pulls off the track. When he grabbed second gear, there was absolutely no power, and so it was Alain Prost leading from Gerhard Berger in second place. This time they'd all got away cleanly, and in the background you could see the three cars that came out of the pit lane. But Alain Prost was leading from Gerhard Berger, Alessandro Nannini and Thierry Boutsen. Ayrton Senna out of the race, no points for him. Never had a race ended so early for Ayrton Senna, but the rest of the field were well away, and Alain Prost had seen his own teammate pulling off in his mirrors. Alain Prost now then leading from Gerhard Berger in second place, and Berger giving him quite a hard time in the Ferrari. Behind him was Alessandro Nannini, then Thierry Boutsen, then a small gap to Philippe Alliot and Riccardo Patrese. Patrese able to take this second start in the spare Williams Renault. And some fine performances from a number of others, but Prost leading. This was Thierry Boutsen in fourth place. Ahead of him, Alessandro Nannini. He locked up his brakes there, going into the first corner on the first lap. Grabbing a gear, dropping back just a little bit. And the field pouring through. There were the two Moneytron Onyxes, then the two Ligiers, then Stefano Modena in the Brabham. Mauricio Gugelmin was soon into the pits in the spare March Judd. And riding with Riccardo Patrese, we saw him overtaken by Ivan Capelli in the other March, moving up and going ahead, now challenging the Lola Lamborghini of Philippe Alliot just ahead. So Alain Prost was leading in these early stages, beginning to pull away just a little bit from Gerhard Berger, who was coming under pressure from Alessandro Nannini and Thierry Boutsen. This was Alain Prost pulling away now from Gerhard Berger as Berger goes wide. Berger went wide onto the gravel just where Riccardo Patrese pulled off and lost 2 places. Alessandro Nannini moved up into second place with Thierry Boutsen just behind, and in fact, as we can see here, Ivan Capelli was challenging for 4th place. Berger was soon into the pits and dropping down the order. Pit stops for new tyres being de rigueur in this French Grand Prix. Berger back out onto the track, but having lost several places, of course, while teammate Nigel Mansell was doing a marvellous job climbing back up through the field. Prost, meanwhile, was gently extending his lead lap after lap. But when he came up on this huge bunch of back markers, led by Stefano Modena, naturally enough, he began to lose places as he caught up the battle for 16th place, comprising 6 cars. First to go was Emanuele Pirro, McLaren test driver. He was obviously going to let Alain Prost go through. Here it is again, Pirro indicating Prost to go through, and Prost having absolutely no problems at all. Prost gently working his way up to Martin Donnelly, the next man to overtake. And Donnelly holding his line there. But he will be seeing the Marlboro McLaren Honda in his mirrors, recognizing the colors, saying to himself, this is one of the leaders, I better get out of the way. And simply choosing his moment, obviously not wishing to lose too much on the man ahead of him, who is Pierluigi Martini. So Donnelly hanging on to his line all the time, the lead being cut, Alain Prost's lead being cut as Nannini and Boutsen pull back the 9 seconds, the 8 seconds lead that Alain Prost had. Prost getting past Donnelly. Next man ahead of him is Pierluigi Martini in the SCM Minardi. And Prost pulling himself up with the slipstream, getting right in behind the car there, so that the drag is less than it normally would be on the Marlboro McLaren Honda, and he goes through past Pierluigi Martini and now has his sights set on Nelson Piquet ahead of him. Riccardo Patrese up ahead of Philippe Alliot, and behind Alliot, Jean Alesi going fantastically well, and then the Ferrari number 28 of Gerhard Berger. There's Alesi, here comes the Ferrari. And then we have Jonathan Palmer, and then the two Onyx Fords. Back with Alain Prost, still with his sights set on Nelson Piquet, still losing time. And he'll be looking to overtake Nelson Piquet next, but he's got Eddie Cheever, Gabriele Tarquini and Stefano Modena to overtake as well. Juts out of the slipstream and goes past the three-time world champion in the Lotus. And having disposed of another. And of course, once Nannini and Boutsen catch up this lot, then they are going to be losing time as well. So it isn't as drastic as it seems for Alain Prost. Here he is again going past Nelson Piquet, now with his sights set on Eddie Cheever in the USF&G Arrows. Cheever holding his line through there, a very tight line as well, making sure that Alain doesn't try anything at the double right-hander. But Cheever is by no means a dirty driver, and he'll certainly let Alain through whenever he can. But Alain having to follow. We look out for the Benetton perhaps catching up this bunch in the background. There is a Benetton, of course, at the back. That's Emanuele Pirro. But here we are with Thierry Boutsen right up behind Alessandro Nannini. And there is the other Benetton. We just briefly saw a flash of it. Nannini now coming up and ducking into the pits for tyres. He has decided to go into the pits as Alain Prost gets past Eddie Cheever. Cheever keeping well out of the way there. So Nannini into the pits, which is going to put Thierry Boutsen up into second place with Ivan Capelli right behind him in third place. And there is Alain Prost now, intending to duck out of the slipstream behind Gabriele Tarquini's AGS, and he goes past. So another of these back markers taken care of, and just Stefano Modena now to overtake, and then Prost can start to build up his lead again. It's dropped from 10 seconds down to 5. At the back of all that bunch are the Williams of Thierry Boutsen and Ivan Capelli's Leighton House March. We look out for, there's one of the marches, but that's Mauricio Gugelmin. Prost now looking to overtake Stefano Modena, who has a long, hard look in his mirrors there. Leaves the door open, but Prost decides, no, that's not for me, not there. And I think down here he will swing out of the slipstream, right at the back of the bunch. Here he goes, out of the slipstream, right at the back of that bunch. We should be looking out for 5 and 16, Boutsen and Capelli. And there is Boutsen. So that is the difference between first and second. This, meanwhile, is fourth and fifth, or are fourth and fifth, and Nannini goes up ahead of Riccardo Patrese, makes it look so easy. So Nannini up into fourth place. Riccardo Patrese in fifth place now, and that man was sixth. Gerhard Berger out of the race now. Apparently into the pits came Thierry Boutsen. This would be significant already. Riccardo Patrese and Ivan Capelli had stopped ahead of him. It was a conventional stop, but unknown to us, he had already broken second gear coming into the pits, and he goes straight up into third, fourth, and into fifth place. So Thierry Boutsen, although we didn't know it at the time, was in trouble. And going ahead of him was Jean Alesi up into fourth place. Out of the race was Philippe Alliot, who had had a fantastic drive, had been in sixth place, but was out of the race. Philippe Alliot out. And finally, on lap 34, Alain Prost came in for a fresh set of tyres, a routine pit stop, held on to his lead and straight out. Only 6 or 7 seconds ahead, however, of Alessandro Nannini in second place. Third was Ivan Capelli. Fourth, Jean Alesi. Fifth, Thierry Boutsen. And sixth, Riccardo Patrese. Alain Prost then, going nicely, adjusting his mirrors, however. This was Alessandro Nannini, but broken rear suspension put him out. An extraordinary accident. Suspension broke under braking as he came into the corner and put him out of the race. So a fantastic but sad debut for the brand new Benetton Ford. Here it is again, just look at the left rear tyre. Suddenly, whack, it slams, it snaps, and Nannini is a passenger as he tries hard to miss Satoru Nakajima and slides off the track, out of the race. Up into second place briefly went Ivan Capelli, but he soon pulled off as well. So second place became the property of this man, Jean Alesi, a fantastic second place on his debut. But closing on him were Riccardo Patrese and Nigel Mansell. There they are. There's Riccardo Patrese and Nigel Mansell in the background. Alesi having a fantastic race. Between them is his teammate Jonathan Palmer. But there is Jean Alesi in his first ever Formula One race, holding second place. Behind him, teammate Jonathan Palmer, and in the background, Riccardo Patrese and Nigel Mansell. Alesi going fantastically well. Into the pits, Bertrand Gachot, who had also gone superbly. Martin Donnelly went straight on. Martin Donnelly still on the track, just running out of brakes and going straight on at the first corner. Meanwhile, with Riccardo Patrese ahead of us, and into the pits was Jean Alesi. So Alesi pulled off for fresh tyres, and Patrese went up into second place, chased hard by Nigel Mansell. Here we are with Thierry Boutsen, and that gearbox problem finally spelt the end of the race for him when he was in fifth place. Thierry Boutsen then out of the race, the Canadian Grand Prix winner, straight into his garage. Boutsen out of the race. Patrese then in second place with Mansell right up behind him, and this would be a battle for many laps until Riccardo Patrese came up to the penultimate corner, got very, very sideways and spun right off into the dirt. Fortunately, he kept the engine running and was able to rejoin, but not before Mansell had got past. Drama then for Riccardo Patrese, but he was able to get back out onto the track again and rejoin in third place, but Nigel Mansell was now long gone. And in second place, here it was again, round he went. Mansell fortunately missing him, and Ricciardo fortunately keeping the engine running, otherwise he would have been out of the race altogether. In the closing stages, Eric Bernard blew up in the Lola Lamborghini. He'd been in 7th place, at one point he'd been in 6th. He tried to coax the engine round, but with no power at all, he pulled off in flames. Meanwhile, Alain Prost started his last lap well ahead, absolutely no problems for him. Taking it very gently at the first corner, with oil flags being shown because of that blown engine. There it is. And the marshals putting out the flames. The French fire marshals doing an excellent job, 120 of them around the circuit. But Alain Prost on his way to win number 37 and extending his lead in the World Championship. Absolutely no problems whatsoever for the Frenchman on his way to this historic win, his second consecutive win at Circuit Paul Ricard, his second win here at the circuit. Nigel Mansell up into second place now, but Alain Prost coming through the final corners to a very, very popular home win. Coming up to the final corner now, and through that right-hander up to the checkered flag, a popular win for Alain Prost. Signalled off the track, nothing to worry about there, signalled off the track into the Parc Fermé, where the car is examined to make sure it conforms to the technical regulations. So a win there for Alain Prost. Second place for Nigel Mansell. Third for Riccardo Patrese in spite of that spin. Fourth for Jean Alesi, a fantastic debut in Grand Prix racing. Fifth for Stefan Johansson.